Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fleet Europe Virtual Fleet Week. This is the final webinar of our exciting Fleet Week that we organized from the 12th until the 16th of October. We have seen during the week that fleet electrification is high on the agenda, not only of corporate fleet managers, but also at the side of the suppliers. And we are really happy with the success that this Fleet Week has given us and the insights that the expert speakers have brought. My name is Steven Schoofs. I'm working for Fleet Europe and I will try to be the moderator of this last webinar of the virtual Fleet Week. The webinar is, of course, an informative webinar. And so this means that if you would like to copy and paste information from this webinar, you need to inform us upfront, because the expert speakers have also shared some information specifically for this webinar, and this should of course be respected. We are really thankful that today's webinar can be organized together with Webfleet Solutions, one of the most promising telematics and technology companies in our industry. And so they are the right fit for this final session of the Virtual Fleet Week. What are we going to do today? You see it on the screen. We are going to talk about implementation, ladies and gentlemen. We had 4 exciting webinars so far, but today it's all about how to implement EVs in your corporate fleet. And we do that with a case study of SAP, followed by insights from our organizing partner and sponsor, Webfleet Solutions.
Pleasure to do so. So Webfleet Solutions is Europe's #1 fleet management service provider. We've been in the field formerly known as TomTom Telematics, and now part of the Bridgestone group. And then I will take you through what I already mentioned, actually the way into electrification of operational fleets. And I think, let me test if this works, yes. As Stefan already mentioned, and what you've seen, actually, electric fleets are all around us. And maybe in the past, it was something of the future, and maybe some eco geeks, maybe sometimes with a little bit more money, they bought an electric vehicle to try it out. But now what you see is also that the main brands are bringing electric vehicles to the market, and actually, although not on a very specific name, they are starting now using their main, let's say, vehicles or categories to bring it in, like the Mini or the Fiat 500, and they particularly, I think, address a important market aspect. But the question is then also, okay, so what's next? How is more commercial operational fleets being prepared to do so? Let me take you a little bit back still. Where does this come from? And I'm sure you're all aware, a key driver actually for this is maybe are more government related. Also, of course, driven by a general public demand for more sustainability. Large cities are creating emission-free zones or even emission-free cities. And there will be moments where some cities will ask actually any delivery into the city to be fully emission-free. At the same time, the EU actually came with regulations to penalize car manufacturers when the overall emissions of the fleet that they sold come above a certain threshold. And I can tell you those are serious penalties. I think this year is still more or less a bit open, but as of next year, these will kick in. And these are quite important also to bring those companies to deliver more type of vehicles. Already mentioned is the charging points. So although those are ramping up, although you would mention 7.3 million, is that a lot? That is far not enough yet, but actually you see more and more points coming. I think that's a very important development as well. Electric fleet. So last year, about 1% of the total fleets, global fleet was electric, 2.6% of the sales. But the expectation is that in 2024, about 10% of the global fleets are actually electric. And actually to reach that, you need to have a massively amount more sales into that area. Also expected in 2022 that actually the overall TCO for an electric vehicle is the same of a combustion engine. So basically meaning you compare not just, let's say, the usage, but also the purchase cost of the vehicle, plus the infrastructure. So I think those are big and important steps that will drive this up. And then in the end, ending to as expectation of in 2030, an outlook of 245 million electric vehicles on the road. So I think this is massive. We're talking about a growth of 36% annually. And the question is then not, will it come now? It's here, it's coming. And I think more is when, as a company, do you hop on, let's say, the bus towards electrification? The number of vehicles is also increasing, I mentioned it. So last year there were about 100 different types of vehicles that are electric, and this year already 180, and also particularly driven by European pressure or government pressure. This will further ramp up. But what's in it for the company? And maybe this is maybe even the most important one. So of course we have the whole sustainability, that is one. But also if you look at the maintenance of an electric vehicle, because it has much less moving parts, it's about only 30% of a combustion engine vehicle. And actually the usage, so the pay that you have for your electricity versus the gasoline is in the same amount. So already these are big steps ups versus the current one. And then basically, if you see, yeah, it altogether brings opportunities for the company. So you have lower costs of running your vehicles, both in maintenance and in usage cost. Of course, we see, and also just mentioned, the purchase costs for electric vehicles are still relatively high or higher, but there are more and more public incentives to help that, also because there is an interest in overall, both from companies and from governments, to reduce carbon footprint. I think maybe one point is that the data that helps company with this is actually maybe a really interesting point. So electric vehicles are actually more modern, so we get much more data availability. And I think if you start using that, and also if you take this step now already, it will help you to take a step, let's say, versus your competition. So basically, it will help you in your leadership position as a company versus the rest of the industry. You can wait until the rest do it, but also there's some complexities that you need to start build into your company, how you plan it, how you deal with the charging. Maybe there are different processes in the company, and I think the earlier you start using this, actually, the quicker you can get there. And be ready for this type of, let's say, challenge. And one thing is the planning. And I've already, if you see, this is a profile of our passenger fleet vehicles, and you can see the number of vehicles versus the mileage that they drive on a day. And this is actually the maximum driven mileage on a specific vehicle. And you can see actually, on average, it's about 200 kilometers. I think people don't really know, companies don't necessarily know what drivers really do on a day. And if you look at the overall thing, you don't drive that many kilometers on a day. Of course, it's different for a commute, because then it's maybe less than 100. But particularly for a commercial fleet or an operational fleet, it's different. And you can see already there's quite a number of vehicles that are have a much longer range than this peak. And of course, particularly passenger cars in black here, and the Teslas are basically leading that. Now, I can imagine that for operational fleets, you don't want to give your drivers a Tesla, or I'm sure they would love that. So you could give that as an extra benefit. But if you're still, let's say, looking at your overall company objectives, maybe a Fiat or a Peugeot Citroën is quite good enough as well. So I think we are getting there. And also those, let's say, commercial vehicles, LCVs, will further actually increase their driving range. So if you know what your fleet is doing, you can plan that very well. You can already start electrifying part of your fleet. I'm just giving you an example more out of interest, what's the same kind of picture for trucks. You can see actually two bubbles. The first bubble is actually the local delivery. So that's actually more last mile delivery into cities. So that's quite an important one. And the long one is the long haul. And you can see with long haul, we're not there yet. Also there, of course, you have more and more, let's say, charging points on the way. But the short range is the one that is important, and that you need to start planning ahead. If you cannot find the vehicle that is already there, actually, then you would need to look a little bit further. one of the advantages of electric vehicles is that it's actually easier to build an electric vehicle out of all kind of parts and batteries and things that are in the market. It's much more complex to build a combustion engine with all the research and actually the past experience that you need for that. So because of that, what you see is that there will be more and more small companies popping up, building very specialized, dedicated, small electrified vehicles. And you can use them ideally for small deliveries or actually help them be built to the specific needs of your company. You could make it with a cooler inside or a heater for your pizzas or something else. Interestingly, of course, is also the price points are below the current price points of the commercial electric fleets available. So I think if you know the behavior of your fleet and the purpose, this is something to consider and look at. So actually, what is happening? Why is not everybody doing it? I think there's still some of the challenges. One is what I call still range anxiety, and actually I would say, well, if you really look objectively at this, it should not necessarily be there. I think the other one is that actually, why should I invest now? Well, every year vehicles are getting better. So if I wait 2 years, probably the range of those vehicles are much further away, and probably the whole charging infrastructure is better there as well. And I think for those, actually, the key reason to bring in telematics can be helpful actually to say bring that point forward where you do the overall planning. So we can help actually by, let's say, assessing what you need as a company, and actually how you can integrate EVs into your planning and take your overall cost into account. Then actually when you've made the decision, to manage and monitor where your charging needs to be, where it is, create all kind of displays, dashboards to monitor it, or actually create notifications if things are not there when you think about it. So, and again, if somebody forgot to charge this vehicle, you can actually create a notification to the main fleet manager, and then actually in the morning you can decide actually that they should send another driver. That is where maybe the vehicle is at home. Obviously, I mean, still a lot of companies keep the vehicles at the company side, where it's much more easier in that case to build a charging infrastructure. And so that is once you're planning, you need to be a bit adaptive, but you can plan around that. And here, so something showing is that we've recently integrated into Webfleet is actually where you can see all the charging points on the map. So that's important and interesting information. With that, you can also build use our planning tools around that. So actually, if you can integrate your range and your charging into your planning, then all those kind of things become much easier. But I think first you need to start looking at is which part of the fleet can you actually electrify right now without having to charge during the day. That's already a quick stepping point, but if not, I think there's all kinds of ways to get that around. And then if still things go wrong, and I need to share one of the initiatives of one of our new partner company, Bridgestone. So one of their key retail chains is First Stop, and First Stop in Spain built its own infrastructure for EV charging. So basically most of the First Stop workshops are being equipped with it. They also created a ultra fast charging point network, and they basically are equipping the main corridors in Spain with that. So actually that you know en route there's a certain point where you have this ultra fast recharging. And then there's a road assistance with fans, but also these small vehicles that actually can bring, well, let's say, drive with a small battery up to your vehicle and then do a small power charge when everything went wrong. So you can actually get people still on the road. And of course, everything equipped with Webfleet would help even to integrate those kind of services much better. So coming now to a conclusion, I think it's there. I think we all know that sustainability. We want this, and I think people are more looking at, yeah. So why are we not doing it yet? We're waiting until things come better. I think you can already do it for a part of your fleet, and should do it if you can do it, because if you start now, you will need to change some of your processes and how you work as well. If you wait changing that and you wait for 3-4 years, you will see that the ones that actually have implemented that first will be ahead when this will further be picking up. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to you, Stephen.